Hey, Kurt.
Hey, Lewis.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm great. This is really funny to have you on the podcast since we talk about Zoom almost every day anyway.
Yeah, I know.
And so how fun to kind of pull you into this medium. We'll probably feel a level of familiarity over some of the people I've talked to who I haven't been on these podcasts with and Zooms and things.
Yeah, I'll have to take off my work hat for sure and have some fun.
Totally. Yeah. Well, so first of all, thanks for joining this podcast, Curious Conversations with Lewis and Friends. And, I think it's a great benefit when you can say the people that you work with every day are also your friends and people that you admire. And I really do have a lot of admiration for you. And I was thinking about, first of all, you're the first guy that's been on this podcast. As I was teeing up the people who inspire me, and this too, like there's so many amazing women that we've worked with, like Linda Greer and others that have been on this podcast. And then I was like, oh yeah, Kurt, I gotta get Kurt on. So I think we're gonna see some diversity of gender coming into the sustainable fashion podcast discussions moving up. But thanks for being the first male to join me in the discussions.
I'm honored, and I know, having followed some of the folks who have already joined you, it's an honor. And kudos to you also for highlighting some of the fantastic leaders in this industry who just happen to be female, many of which are mentors to me and mentors to you as well.
That's right. Well, I think, we could probably do a whole podcast discussion on how this industry, has skewed towards, gender roles. Because, traditionally the textile apparel was very male dominated. And I think even when you travel to supply chains and you go watch assembly, there's certain functions that are only women and there are certain functions that only men will do. And I remember seeing that, I think it was in Vietnam, where they're like, oh no, we can't have women in this part of the production. We can only have the men here. I don't know if you've run into that in certain supply chains too. Yeah, it's very interesting. And so anyway, another podcast for another day is women in leadership in fashion and textile production and, gender roles. I think that would be cool. But let's back up a little bit. So you and I get to work together every day. You're our vice president of programs at Apparel Impact Institute. But I was trying to think, when did you and I actually meet? And I have this recollection of being introduced to you in like some hotel ballroom at an SAC meeting somewhere, like when you were still at Target. I don't know if that's your recollection or.
Yeah. And I want to say it was in Hong Kong. And it's kind of funny, if you would follow my career, that was like my first major presentation that I gave in front of a large audience too. So I was riding this high of, I'm finally done with this big presentation. And then I remember very vividly running into you, Lewis, and we hit off a conversation. I think we sat there and talked for a good half hour just about how things were going and possibilities for working together. And look at us now, almost. That's right. It's gotta be almost 10 years later, I would say.
Yeah, that's when we had just launched the Fashion Positive work at Cradle to Cradle, and so and here we are. And then for those that are listening, so Kurt, you started your career at Target, or did you do something before you were at Target?
I started at Target, following a traditional, at Target you'd refer to it as the traditional merchant path, as a business analyst, and then to a manager position. And that's where I went back to school part-time, got my MBA, and started to begin realizing my role as a more futurist mindset, wanting to work on projects that were more long-term, sustainable in nature. And actually, I would say that at the time, I began to equate sustainability with just more longer-term strategic thinking. And as luck would have it, as I started to look at material and commodity prices and evaluations over time within my sourcing roles, I started to also connect that with, hey, we're using more as a world, as a globe, than we have capacity to sustain over time. So we might want to look at this a little bit differently as an organization. Yeah. Starting to question those things within Target and even applying some what I'll equate to as pretty obvious changes in the production lines that I was working on. I became known as kind of the green guy, even within the role that I had. And it provided me an opportunity to start a new team within the sourcing organization at Target, where I started a sourcing sustainability team, which has now grown into something that's incredible at that organization. I'm quite proud to look back on it and think of myself as somebody who's there from the beginning. And I guess from there I started to, I would say that's where my environmentalist started to kick in a bit. And I started to shift from, the more business sourcing mindset and into, hey, I've got a responsibility here. And I feel passionate about doing the kind of work that we do today.
Yeah, that resonates with me too. And having a business background and an MBA, it sounds like it's that efficiency and practicality of the business that you saw, that you're thinking about, that long-term de-risking and sustainability of how we function and how we price our work means we should be doing these things better. So it was not you. What you're saying is you weren't coming in because you were thinking about the planet or, human and environmental impact. You were really thinking about how can this company save money, make money, be long-term more efficient, which is a great way to come into sustainability because that's what's going to sell it, right?
Absolutely. A mutual friend of ours and a mentor of mine, Dr. Linda Greer, always said that there was an environmentalist lying in the wake with me. And a lot of that is attributed to, I grew up outdoors. I love nature. And to this day, I try to instill it into my family, into my children, just wandering around and getting inspired and curious with what the world has for us around us. So that created a great connection point for me, both with the work that I was doing and what truly inspires me. And that is, the great outdoors.
You know what? I like that you said I identify with that too, because I grew up, my dad took us out canoeing, or we had a kayak, which is a little, we had kayaks and we had canoes and gunoos, which has a flat back on it. We used to go out on all the little streams and rivers of North Florida, and we had a house, a little cottage on the Gulf. And so there was a lot of outdoor nature. I was a Boy Scout, so it was like a lot of outdoor nature, but I never would have called myself an environmentalist. It's almost like some of those terms and terminology, I think back then almost felt like, putting yourself in some kind of activist or kind of edgier box than you want to be in. Like you're supposed to be out protesting, or if you're an animal rights person, you're throwing paint on people, I don't know. It's interesting how we've sort of, made certain terms, it's not demonized them, but it's like we put people in some activist box that when you're actually like, no, I actually love playing outdoors, and then do this work, and it activates that part of you that remembers how important all that is, right?
Yeah, and I guess that may become another podcast at some point in time, the politicization of the industry that we're in or the work that we do. I actually don't separate the two. And I actually think it's kind of strange how within the work we do, there's kind of the sustainability folks, the environmental folks, and then there's the business folks. But you and I have both seen that those who meld those worlds together are by far the most successful and most successful organizations too, that are thriving in this industry. I mean, for me, it's more a principle. I live my life trying to do the right thing, and even thinking of I spent some time in the Boy Scouts as a young man, and you always wanted to leave wherever you were in a better condition than you found it, and that type of mentality resonates with me. That I don't want to be the reason for degrading something or to be in an environment that is worse off as a result of something that I had a hand in.
I love that, because I always think about that too from the Boy Scouts is, leave your campsite cleaner than you found it. And it is that idea of stewardship. And it's that idea, it's actually indigenous wisdom, right? That, you would, whatever you take, you put back, and sometimes you put back more, and that you sort of have a mindfulness about your impact, which is in the name of the organization that we run, the Impact Institute. It's like, what is the impact here? And like, what is your role in this impact, and how can you improve it? And it just seems like it's like, these are common sense things, right? They're just about decency too, right? Like how you give back to where you take. Unfortunately, as you pointed out, that's oftentimes in conflict with making money or saving money in terms of companies. And I think that's a large part of like I would imagine why you were also drawn to the Clean by Design program, which was one that not only was efficiency and made sense, but also made money back. It was kind of a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, it's exactly why I got into this work. And it continues to be one of the more, I would say, inspiring, but also frustrating components of the work that we do every day. And you have hand in this too, that there's so many very logical, easy to do things that just don't get the proper attention within the work that we do. And so, as you mentioned, the I guess, progression of my career, the work that I do, and even for me as an individual, took a massive step as I left Target to join an organization called the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I was fortunate enough to work for and with Dr. Linda Greer, who started our Clean by Design program that is kind of the core of our implementation projects at AII. But she really, brings that mindset that resonates with me so well to this work. Is let's start with what's most obvious. Let's take the practical approach, business ready solutions, and make some meaningful progress. And I like to think that is kind of what I can carry forward within the work that we do from what those original opportunities were. So that opportunity itself, joining the Natural Resources Defense Council, was simply to apply my business acumen, my brand relationships to a program that had, even still today, I feel limitless potential for continued growth, because it does really draw on the obvious solutions within textile manufacturing and beyond that just should be done. It's cost effective. It's good for the environment, and it kind of draws back to my original decision making that I did as a manager at Target. That we'll do this. It just makes sense. Why wouldn't we do this? That's the type of mentality that we bring to the work that we do, and what drew me to it.
It appeals to that part of me that read business school cases about just-in-time production, or you have some scenario where some companies looking at some issue and they retool their manufacturing, to be more efficient, process re-engineer steps 1, 2, 3, and reading those cases always has such great satisfaction for those of us who think that way about practicality, right?
Yeah, and little did I know that the work and I guess my passion would bring me to what I really like to do, and that's bringing people together, like-minded people together towards one particular vision or mission, and it fits perfectly with the programs that we develop and the work that I continue to do. Because at its core, although it's a highly technical, engineer-oriented program that we deploy and that we continue to develop, really what I do is manage change, and that's something that I find myself to be pretty good at, and I like to do. It can be aggravating and frustrating, but I know I'm a very resilient person, and I'll bend and adapt and get to whatever goal that we're setting out to achieve, assuming I've got the right people in the boat with me. And that's what I really like about this work is, this based on this webcast, we work with some really great people, and that's what makes this career path fun for me.
Totally. Two things. One is for those listening who want to learn more about Clean by Design, go listen to the Linda Greer podcast, because we dive in more there. So we'll save space here not to explain it and dive in, but we're happy to drive people to that. But secondly, what you're talking about too is, I think a lot of times I think about this work that we're doing is like putting a puzzle together. And so, or sometimes it's like maybe a Rubiks Cube or something, where you're like, if I just do this and then I turn it this way, do this.
Yeah.
So, it's this idea of putting we have all the pieces. I'm just not exactly sure how they're going to fit together. So let's play with this a little bit. And I feel like I was writing you an email an hour ago about some potential work about aligning some circular economy material products into some of our Clean by Design programs and how that would work. And I was like, and just my brain's like, can we do this? Should we do this? Is it, what stage is it? Is it at yarn prep spinners, or is it going to come in later? And, that's the kind of stuff we get to think through and then obviously turn into pilots and test, right? That probably appeals to your brain as well too.
Very much. And a Rubik's Cube is a perfect way to describe it, I think, because sometimes when you make the move, you realize, okay, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, or maybe it wasn't, the move that we should have made, but let's quickly course correct and try it a different way. And that's what I think is is really fun about the variability of the work that we do on a regular basis, and something that I draw passion from. Because as we're twisting that Rubik's Cube, what we're doing is trying and failing. And sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't. But I feel like as an organization with the type of individuals we have on staff, it's what really inspires us, and what draws us to this work is that we're willing to take some risks, willing to try, but then also learn from those opportunities, those failures that we've had, and do it better the next time.
Is it new as you're looking at, because one of the questions I want to ask you is like, what have you seen change in the years that you've been working in sustainability in the apparel sector and textiles and all? So that's A. And then B, is it new? I'm kind of like baiting the answer here. So you can disagree or disagree that brands who are competitors are willing to sit around the table with this proverbial Rubik's Cube and have the conversation of, oh, should we turn left or right? And they're having this conversation together rather than going and having those conversations in silos. So is the collective action, part of this new? Like, what are you experiencing in the movement of sustainable apparel?
Yeah, two major things that I've observed, and honestly, it's still hard for me to get used to this. One is the conversation used to be solely about cost, about price, about efficiency. And I had so much success early in my career selling that as the reason for sustainability. And these last few years, it's been incredibly motivating to see that conversation really shift. And I think the onset of things like science-based targets, other goals like removing harmful chemicals and water-based targets that many organizations are now setting in this industry has brought those types of conversations up to the same level of pricing, costing, and in some cases even going beyond the costing pricing discussion. So that's one major change that I've seen that I find incredibly promising for the work that we do. But through that, there's a recognition, I think more so than ever, that it does take an industry approach, that just one organization sitting, in their silo, as you mentioned, deciding this is how I'm going to do it, that only works on a limited scale. And to truly shape the industry, to change the industry, I think even disrupt the industry, it does take organizations sitting down at a table and saying, this is the type of disruption that we can buy into, and we're willing to take that risk collectively to see it happen. I think you see that play out with circularity. We're beginning to see that within the climate target setting and achievement roadmap work. It's really incredible to see, the concepts of collective action that started with tools like the Higg Index around creating standardized tools are now being brought into the application of assessment tools and criteria and implementation efforts as well.
Yeah. Wow, you said a lot of good things in there that I agree with. And I think that it's accurate that the ability for companies to sit alongside each other now and be willing to have a conversation that moves beyond just cost savings, but actually understanding that we have to do this, and that this is systemic change and it doesn't happen with one player. I remember years ago when we were trying to do some cradle to cradle work on buildings, and we had Google preferring cradle to cradle certified products in their new construction, and really putting that out in the bids. It was huge for us, right? Because they were growing, like, I can't even remember, 50,000 square feet of commercial real estate a week globally or something. I'm making that number up, but it was something like that insane amount of growth for their offices around the world. And they were saying, and we want all cradle to cradle. And we were so excited. And then we had, some wise leader in the organization, a board member, somebody say, you don't need one Google, you need 10 Googles. And once you get 10 Googles sourcing you at that level, you've changed production, because companies will have to make to your standard. I think there's a very similar thing that you're basically sitting around the table with, in the apparel world, brands that size, scalable, the largest, that are coming together to do it, right?
Yeah. And, that's something that I picked up during my years at NRDC. This idea of, there's a lot of differences. It's almost a matter of diplomacy, where brands may not be able to speak to things directly the same. They might have very slightly different metrics or very slightly different goals that they're achieving towards or striving towards. But, when you're in a position of just wanting the result, it's a very powerful position to be in. It's like, okay, forget the language. Let's just get to the next step together. We don't need to slice and dice, what year we're trying to achieve these targets by. We need to determine, okay, what's the right first step? Can we agree upon that and move forward? It's a really refreshing place to be in when you can just specifically focus on the end result rather than, the language, the nuance, the internal dialogue necessary to get there.
Yeah, 100%. So, all right, let's shift into the questions that are sort of around like you and clearly still the work, but tell me, okay, the pandemic, how's the pandemic impacted A, you personally,
Mm-hmm.
and then B, how you go about your work and this work in general, or how the changes in the work is impacting you because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so me personally, I've got 3 little kids at home. Well, 2 and then 3 through the pandemic, added 1, and it's, I think it's hard to find something. Everyone's had a unique position, and it has not been easy for anyone. I think I look forward to the days when I can look back and say this actually ended up being a bit of a positive time for me and my family, because it has certainly brought us closer together, both physically and emotionally. But I'm ready to get outside now. I live in Minneapolis. We haven't mentioned that, which is fine. We have 4 seasons. We're very, distinct seasons. We're coming into some warmer weather, and we got to get out of this house. So that's basically how it's affected me the most on a personal level. Is we've had to deal with school closures and working from home. But overall, I consider myself to be fortunate, and I think that connects with the work also. We've done a great job of keeping the organization moving along. We dug into innovation in the last year, things that were kind of on the back burner of, when we have the time, let's get to this. Well, we had a long time to dig into some of those concepts and ideas in the last year. And it's putting us into a great position as we come into the years ahead, when things are starting to get back to some semblance of normal now. But a big portion of our work, without getting too far into the details, is based on, in many cases, face-to-face interactions and on-site visits. And if we're not able to do that, then we've got to find a new course or find new things to do. I think our organization responded in a fantastic way, both finding ways that we can develop and find new work products, but also to question some of the norms that we brought into this industry, that we brought into this work. Maybe we don't need as many face-to-face interactions. Maybe we don't need as many on-site visits. And that's been a pretty exciting part of what we've had to learn through this situation. However, I'm chomping at the bit. I miss my team. I miss, being able to see you. We haven't seen each other face to face in over a year now. It starts to wear on you after a while.
Yeah, we've talked about this a couple times recently, but my last airline trip before on March 11th was actually to fly to work with you for a couple of days in the team. So and that got canceled, and I turned
right
around
as it was all happening. It's so crazy.
I think I was coming from Europe or something. Anyway, all right. So that was one question: pandemic impacting your work. What is so like when you think about this work and sustainability and the planet, what's keeping you up at night other than your infant child?
Yes, infant child. That's the one thing. But interesting enough, it's his future. It's my children's future that keeps me up at night. I think, for better or worse, we see firsthand, or I've been able to see firsthand the needs of the industry, or I should say industry in general, to change and change quickly. I mean, you look at the last few years and natural disasters, climate change effects on the world. I don't know what more we need to see as a society to begin prompting the necessary change, disruptive change, to begin doing things a little bit differently. We both discussed, growing up in a world where it was fun to go outside, we could go explore, and I want to ensure that my children have that same future. And there are times when I just don't feel like there's a a clear enough sense of urgency built around the work that we do. And that's the type of thing that, both literally and figuratively keeps me up at night.
Totally. So then, are you optimistic? What brings you hope, or do you have hope?
Yeah, I guess the way I just bring that up makes me sound like we have no way of getting out of this. But
yeah.
Even some of the things that we've already discussed, the idea of so many organizations, the business side of the equation seems to be picking up where, for lack of a better way of viewing it, where governments have not stepped in and stepped up. I think the goals that many companies are setting are aggressive and ambitious. There's still so much work left to be done, though, in connecting that ambition with the realities of what it's going to take to get it done. And I personally would like to see the government play a larger role in that as well. But ultimately, I like to see the ambition, and there is ambition out there. I just I hope that we can begin moving things a little bit quicker, which hopefully coming out of the pandemic, we have the opportunity to do.
Yeah. It certainly feels that way. I mean, there is momentum in all of this that it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, for sure. Does that maintain? Is that some spurt of humans just feeling cagey and needing to throw their energy into things? I guess we'll find out, right?
Well, just a real quick, going back to the pandemic story, that last March or January through March, we were coming into one of the biggest years, or potentially the biggest year, of program deployment in both, well, obviously AII's history as a short-lived organization, but the Clean by Design program's history. I mean, we were talking about 3 and 4 times the number of partners and facilities we were going to be working with. So there's a momentum and pent-up demand that's there. That gives me hope that where we were at one point, it started that trajectory. Now I just hope that we can maintain that course. So it's still a very exciting time to be in this space, but hopefully a way that we can begin delivering on the ambition that we're all just striving to achieve in this space as well.
Well, a little plug for your team's work. Your recruitment of brands and facilities moving into this first quarter of the year was pretty stellar. So I think we're heading in a really positive direction to kind of build back to those ambitions for sure.
Hats off to the
brand.
In
the opposite direction.
Yeah, things could have gone a number of different ways during the last year, and it was very impressive to see so many brands double down on the commitments that they made. It would have been a understandable opportunity to say, hey, we've got to rethink some of the things that we've previously said due to the current economic state of the world. But really, nobody has done that, and that's incredible. It's a great time more than ever to be working together, even if financials are crunched. It kind of makes the case for the type of cooperative work that we try to bring to our partners.
Totally. So we've talked about mentorship and leadership a little bit. We've both mentioned Linda Greer as someone that we've both learned tremendous things from. Who else, when you think about who inspires you, whether it's somebody you've worked with or no, or somebody larger, where do you get your inspiration from and model your own sort of growth around that leadership?
Yeah, so Linda is a very strong figure and has been a strong figure in shaping my career, my life, some of the decisions that I've made. And we can bring this full circle to the beginning of this conversation and it speak to the role of women in my life. The other one is my mother. I've got a mom who was a single mother. I was raised by a single mother growing up, very humble upbringing, continues to be kind of the person I go to kind of keep myself grounded, and also to kind of sort through, the polarization that this world has become. That's something that she instilled in me, is to see things from both sides of the coin and kind of, be able to meet individuals where they are rather than where I would like them to be. That's something that from a very young age she instilled in me.
You know what? I love that you say that, because what that's reminding me of is your ability to also activate the part of you that is looking at skill sets that someone may traditionally say, well, men think this way, women think this way. And we do a little bit too much of that sort of identification, but they're sort of qualities and ideas we might identify as being, this is a more feminine approach to this situation. This is a more masculine approach. If we stereotype behavior, and I'm sure we're going to start deconstructing that even more, and we should. But in 2009, I think it was 2009, His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Vancouver at a peace summit said the world will be saved by the Western woman. And I was like, well, probably women in general. And then I started tearing that down and thinking, well, maybe it's the feminine, and maybe it's the rise in all of us to start thinking in these new and different ways in the sort of linear approach that the patriarchy has approached it for so long. So I don't know. That's for our podcast on gender.
No, I don't shy away from the fact that the strongest, most influential people who I model the work that I do after, I would say at least 9 out of 10 of them are women, and I don't shy away from that at all.
I think this is why you and I also get along, because that's been my experience as well too. So we will do that podcast. All right. Well, before we leave, I just want to here we go. Any books or podcasts or anything that these days that you want to point people to listen to, whether it's on sustainability or any topic that is inspiring you?
Yeah. Podcasts, I'm so boring. It's like news and sports for me. Talking about stereotypes, I guess. But books,
TV show, Netflix shows. I mean,
So books, though, I mean, and I read all over the spectrum too, like spy novels to like nonfiction, but I'm all over that. But one thing that I would say that relates to the work, there's a book called World Made by Hand. The last name of the gentleman is Huntsley, and it's, so again, a little peek into, my interests. I really read a lot of post-apocalyptic that genre, and it's really hard to find books that are like visualizing the future state of the world without zombies or aliens playing a role in it. And this book actually does that. It's a bit of a more real, I would say, even in today's age, real, given that there's a role that health and wellness role plays into the book, but it's ultimately in the future we end up going back to our roots, becoming more closely tied to nature, and it's a little bit more of a realistic view of what a world could look like if all of a sudden technology were removed for it, our ability to have energy sources was removed from it. So that's one that kind of comes to mind as something that I really resonated with as I started doing this work, and in a way it's kind of a fantasy in a way that, like, at some point all these skills that I've picked up outdoors and in the woods to make a fire and take care of myself will become useful in a future world.
I think I've got a apocalypse survival handbook somewhere that somebody gave me. So I mean, like, those things appeal to me too. And if you were a Boy Scout, you did a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so, like, even an egg, a match, and a piece of chocolate come back in 2 days.
Now what?
Yeah. So So that's great, and we'll add a link to that book. It sounds like a book
Sure.
I'd enjoy reading too. So any parting wisdoms or a special mission statement or mantra or something that you want to throw out to the audience listening?
I don't know. This was really fun. I guess one thing that I'll say, and I always think of this and bring it up with my team, is come to the table with solutions. There's no shortage of problems right now in the work that we do, in the world that we live in. I get excited about solutions and working towards them, and I think that's a mantra that really sticks with me, is the idea of, okay, we can all complain about everything that's going wrong, but let's figure out how to make it right and come to the table with some optimism and the solutions that are going to get us from point A to point B.
I love that. You're reminding me of, I went to a dinner at Levi's a number of years ago, and Chip Bergh was speaking, their CEO, and he said, during times of limitation is when humans get so creative. And he said, at Levi's, we're looking at water scarcity and, all these depleting resources is actually an opportunity for creativity to come in. And I think that's what you just said, like, come to the table with solutions, because this is where it gets fun. Like, limitations mean I can only do this with an egg, a match, and a piece of chocolate. So what am I going to make?
There we go.
How am I going to survive, right? Awesome.
Exactly.
Thank you, Kurt, for spending this half hour with me, and we'll do it again.
Anytime.
Bye.
Bye.